Hey diverse book lovers, welcome to this month's episode of Getting Lit, a monthly podcast dedicated to diverse books coming out for the month. Today, we're going to be talking about all the books coming out in May that you should put on your list. My name is Lala, and you can find me on Instagram at thisblackgirlreads. And on today's show, we'll discuss a political page-turner that delivers, a memoir of grief by a prolific feminist voice, a riveting book about strong women during the Cuban Revolution, a Jamaican story and a Filipino story, both about family ties and self-discovery and a search for truth, and a middle school historical mystery. So I can't wait to get started. Today's show is jam-packed. But before we get started, I want to give a big shout out to today's sponsor, Libro FM. Libro FM makes it possible for you to buy audiobooks through your local bookstore, giving you the power to keep your money within your local economy, create local jobs, and make a difference in your community. And best of all, you get your first audiobook for free. Find out more at librofm.com or check out the link in the description. So I also want to give a huge shout out to Toronto Life and Perdita Felician, who gave me a shout out in the May edition of Toronto Life and highlighted the podcast. So if you're coming to the podcast for the first time from there, welcome and thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Perdita, for listening. And yeah, now let's get lit. So the first book that we're talking about today is While Justice Sleeps by Stacey Abrams. And if you don't know, Stacey Abrams is well known for her political work. She is a champion for voting rights in Georgia and across the nation. And now she has written this political legal thriller that is both complex and clever. In While Justice Sleeps, Abrams brings us an intricately weaved thriller set within the walls of the U.S. Supreme Court. The plot is so rich and had me literally at the edge of my seat. So the story centers around legendary Supreme Court Justice Howard Wynne and a sudden turn of events that leaves his law clerk Avery Keene in the center of it all. So for some reason unknown to Avery, Judge Wynne names her as his legal guardian and gives her his power of attorney. So when he falls into a coma, her life gets really messy really quickly. Avery soon discovers that Justice Wynne had been secretly researching a controversial case involving a proposed merger between an American biotech company and a genetics firm in India. And there's also a ton of intrigue and kind of political wrangling to potentially replace Wynne while he's in this coma. So in the meantime, Wynne has entrusted Avery with an incredibly complex puzzle that is designed to lead her to the secret that he fears will destroy the democracy. There's also a ton of twists and turns that involves the White House, Homeland Security, and the FBI. So Avery is helped by Justice Wynne's son Jared, his lawyer Noah, and Ling, her roommate. So this book is so complex with multiple interwoven plots, and the pieces I feel don't really come together until the very end. But I really love the urgency of the story and the conspiracy. It reminded me a lot of The Pelican Brief, and I just love the way the story unfolded. So this one is called While Justice Sleeps by Stacey Abrams, and it comes out on May 25th. So the next book that we're going to be talking about today is Notes on Grief by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. So in this must-read memoir, Adichie expands on her celebrated New Yorker essay by the same name, delving into her grief over her father's death. So in June of 2020, in the height of COVID-19, Adichie's father dies suddenly in Nigeria. So in this tender and powerful essay expanded from the original New Yorker text, she articulately remembers her beloved father, notes Notes on Grief is at once a tribute to a long life of grace and wisdom. It's a story of a daughter's fierce love for a parent and a revealing examination of the layers of loss and the nature of grief. So one of the lines that I loved, I'm just going to share. Adichie writes, "Grief is a cruel kind of education. You learn how ungentle mourning can be, how full of anger. You learn how glib condolences can feel. You learn how much grief is about language, the failure of language, and the grasping for language." So I just love that quote because I feel like it really illustrates exactly some of the feelings that I felt when I lost my father in 2010, and it just really deeply touched me. So I think this is such a powerful book and a powerful work from one of my favorite writers. So this one is called, once again, Notes on Grief by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, and it comes out on May 11th. So the next book that we're talking about today is The Most Beautiful Girl in Cuba by Chanel Clayton. So The Most Beautiful Girl in Cuba is another riveting historical fiction novel by Chanel Clayton. It is a retelling of the real life of Evangelina Cisneros, but she was proclaimed the most beautiful girl in Cuba in the late 1890s, and she became kind of the face of the Cuban Revolution from Spanish control. So the book features 3 revolutionary women who at the end of the 19th century fought for freedom. So the 3 women we have, number 1 is Evangelina. So she's thrown into jail at the beginning of the book as a rebel during the Cuban War on independence, and she's dubbed the most beautiful girl in Cuba by the press to both sell papers and to raise awareness of the plight in Cuba. Then we have Grace Harrington, who is a young female reporter who lands a job at William Randolph Hearst newspaper in 1896. And she gets paid by the story, and she must prove herself and the story of Cuba and its fight for independence from Spain. This might be her ticket to success. Then we have Maria Perez, and she's a young woman who gave up her social standing when she married for love and has become kind of a courier for the Cuban revolutionaries in Havana. And she will help Grace and her staff attempt to free Angelina. So through the stories of these 3 women, Clayton examines the war, when war is necessary, and should the press report on the war and take active means to support it. The stories of the 2 Cuban women highlight their dilemmas too. How can the wealthy support the war, and how can women be involved in revolution? I just love this book. I love the way that Clayton tends to write really strong women, and even just the way she portrays them and just the way that she writes them with such fierce purpose. I really love that. So this one is called The Most Beautiful Girl in Cuba, and it comes out on May 4th. So next up, we have Hurricane Summer by Asha Bromfield. So Tilla and her sister, Maya, are going to see their father again for the first time in over a year. So he's had a pattern of leaving them and their mother in Canada and returning to Jamaica whenever he feels the urge to, which is like often abruptly and without consideration for his family. So Tilla has long wondered what her father's life in Jamaica is like, and now she'll have the entire summer to find out. And Tilla is determined to make the best of the trip despite her own conflicting feelings about her father, and for her sister's sake as well. She wants to make sure this is a positive experience. So they travel to Jamaica, and almost immediately Tilla feels unwelcomed in Jamaica. Her family lives in the countryside, and the disparity between her lower class Canadian wealth, and her Jamaican family's poverty is very staggering. She's dubbed kind of as the foreign princess. They think that she's spoiled, that she's bratty, and worst of all, that she's very slutty. So nothing Tilla does or says seems to be right, and she tries to find her place in Jamaica and among her family members, she experiences discrimination, hardship, love, and a true reckoning of finding herself. So I just love this book. Hurricane Summer is a moving and insightful portrait of modern issues surrounding race and classism, as well as an emotional story about a fractured father-daughter relationship. And Sheila doesn't expect to find herself caught in a hurricane that will change her life and her dad's life forever. So I just loved the character development in this book. I loved the way the author really described the Jamaican landscape and the feelings. Like, it really brought me home. So this one is called Hurricane Summer by Asha Bromfield, and this comes out on May 4th. Next on our list today is Excuse Me While I Ugly Cry by Joya Goffney. So this one was such a good book. I didn't expect to like it so much when I got it. I thought it was going to be a little bit corny, but it really surprised me. So we follow the main character, Quinn, and if you've ever lied about something and hoped to God that no one ever found out, so you wrote it down in your journal thinking your secret would be safe, well, that's exactly what happens to our protagonist in this book. So Quinn keeps a journal and makes a list of literally everything, from the most mundane things to the most embarrassing. So one day her journal is stolen and she is blackmailed into facing her 7 greatest fears. Otherwise, the entire journal will go public. So who took it? We don't know, but Carter, the boy who misplaced the notebook by Era, is willing to help her, even though they didn't really seem to get along. And we go on kind of this quest, right? And I just really love the characters in this book. I loved Quinn. I didn't expect to like this book so much, but it was such a great story and kind of my greatest fear come to life, because if you know anything about me, you know that I'm a journaler. I journal every day, and sometimes my journal are just filled with mundane things, but sometimes they're actually filled with, like, you know, deep thoughts and deep feelings and all that. And I don't know what I would do if it went missing, but whatever. The book is super cute and thought-provoking. It's a YA contemporary, bringing with humor and heart. I think that the author does such a great job by touching on a lot of different issues such as racism, bullying, and she does it very gently and very thoughtful. So I really like this book. This one is called Excuse Me While I Ugly Cry by Joya Goffney, and it comes out on May 4th. So the next book on our list today is Arsenic and Adobo by Mia Manasala. So after a really bad breakup, our main character, Leela Macapagal, decides to move back to her hometown of Shady Palms, Illinois, partly because her aunt needs help in running her restaurant and because Leela is ready for a change. So when her former boyfriend, who is also a restaurant critic, writes nasty things about their restaurant, Leela has a huge public argument with him, and then he happens to die while eating there at their restaurant, and all eyes turn towards Leela as the killer. So it's obvious to the police that she did this crime, and they are not interested in looking at anyone else because they think that Leela is the culprit. So she has to figure out kind of how this happened for herself. With a little help from her friends, Leela begins her own investigation and discovers that many people in her small town have so many secrets. So it's up to her to discover the killer and to clear her name. I was attracted to this book for two reasons: the gorgeous cover and the emphasis on Filipino culture. And wow, did it ever deliver. I immediately fell in love with Leela and her wacky Filipino aunties. I love them. The author did a great job of bringing the characters to life. Leela was a very relatable character, and I just love the way the story unfolded. Although it was a mystery, I didn't feel like it was too heavy, and I really appreciated that. So this one is called Arsenic and Adobo by Mia Manasala, and it comes out on May 4th. So this was a packed show, and the last book that I'm going to talk about today is actually a middle school book, and I think this is the first middle school book that I've talked about on the show, but I really love this book. So this one is called Ophi's Ghosts by Justina Ireland. So I fell in love with Justina Ireland when she wrote Dread Nation, which you should read if you haven't already. And now she's back with this middle school novel that was also so captivating. So the book takes place in 1922, and Ophelia Harrison's life abruptly changes when her father is murdered and she and her mother have to flee Georgia to Pittsburgh. So no longer attending school, the young Ophi is put to work as a maid in a wealthy white family's home where her mother is also working, trying to save enough money to move out of this place that they're living, this shared family home where they are not welcomed by most of the people who live there. And so Ophi is trying to make sense of the world around her and the big fact that she sees ghosts. One of her relatives is trying to also help her navigate the fact that she sees ghosts. And she soon discovers that the help that she was getting in her new job is not from a living woman. And she's no longer living because that ghost was murdered. So this sets Ophi off to try to figure out who would have done this and who would have done such a thing to this woman and why. So Justina Ireland does a great job of transporting you to the 1920s Pittsburgh and to Ophi's unique world. She creates characters and ghosts you can care about and delivers a story that will stay with the reader long after you've finished. I just love this story. I think it is a perfect story for middle grade readers, and I definitely will be reading this book over again with my little girl as well. So this one is called Ophi's Ghosts by Justina Ireland, and it comes out on May 18th. That was a big show. We went through some great books, and I really hope that you guys found one, or I talked about one that you guys can pick up. Let me know if you do pick any up. I would love to know what you think as well. So that is all for our show today. Thank you so much for listening to the Getting Lit podcast. I am Lala, and you can find me on Instagram at This Black Girl Reads. Do not forget to jump over to Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts and hit that subscribe button. And don't forget to leave a rating and review to get the podcast in front of more eyes. It is so appreciated. And I would love to know what you guys are reading next. And if you picked up any of these books, remember all the links are in the show notes. Thank you for getting lit with me today. And remember, if you're reading what everyone else is reading, then you'll probably think the way everyone else is thinking.